I talk sometimes about how people assume that like the big debates in Wikipedia or the sort of arguments are between the party of the left and the party of the right. And I would say, no, it's actually the party of the kind and thoughtful and the party of the jerks is really it. I mean, left and right, like, yeah, bring me somebody I disagree with politically, as long as they're thoughtful, kind. We're gonna have a real discussion. I give an example of our article on abortion. So, if you can bring together a kind and thoughtful Catholic priest and a kind and thoughtful Planned Parenthood activist, and they're going to work together on the article on abortion, that can be a really great thing if they're both kind and thoughtful. Like, that's the important part. They're never going to agree on the topic, but they will understand, okay, like, Wikipedia is not going to take a side, but Wikipedia is going to explain what the debate is about, and we're going to try to characterize it fairly. And it turns out, like, your kind and thoughtful people, even if they're quite ideological, like a Catholic priest is generally going to be quite ideological on the subject of abortion, but they can grapple with ideas and they can discuss, and they may feel very proud of the entry at the end of the day, not because they suppress the other side's views, but because they think the case has been stated very well that other people can come to understand it. And if you're highly ideological, you assume, I think naturally, if people understood as much about this as I do, they'll probably agree with me. You may be wrong about that, but that's often the case. So that's where, that's what I think we need to encourage more of in society generally is grappling with ideas in a really, thoughtful way.
So is it possible, if the majority of volunteers, editors of Wikipedia, really dislike Donald Trump, are they still able to write an article that empathizes with the perspective of, for a time at least, a very large percentage of the United States that were supporters of Donald Trump, and to have a full, broad representation of him as a human being, him as a political leader, him as a set of policies promised and implemented, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think so. And I think if you read the article, it's pretty good. And I think a piece of that is within our community, if people have the self-awareness to understand. So I personally wouldn't go and edit the entry on Donald Trump. I get emotional about it, and I'm like, I'm not good at this. And if I tried to do it, I would fail. I wouldn't be a good Wikipedian. So it's better if I just step back and let people who are more dispassionate on this topic edit it. Whereas there are other topics that are incredibly emotional to some people where I can actually do quite well. Like I'm going to be okay. Maybe we were discussing earlier the efficacy of masks. I'm like, oh, I think that's an interesting problem, and I don't know the answer, but I can help kind of catalog what's the best evidence and so on. I'm not going to get upset. I'm not going to get angry. I'm able to be a good Wikipedian. So I think that's important. And I do think, though, in a related framework, that the composition of the community is really important. Not because Wikipedia is or should be a battleground, but because blind spots. Like maybe I don't even realize what's biased if I'm particularly of a certain point of view and I've never thought much about it. So one of the things we focus on a lot, the Wikipedia volunteers are, we don't know the exact number, but let's say 80% plus male. And they're of a certain demographic. They tend to be college educated, heavier on tech geeks than not, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a demographic to the community, and that's pretty much global. I mean, somebody said to me once, why is it only white men who edit Wikipedia? And I said, you've obviously not met the Japanese Wikipedia community. It's kind of a joke because the broader principle still stands. Who edits Japanese Wikipedia? A bunch of geeky men, right? And women as well. So we do have women in the community, and that's very important. But we do think, okay, you know what? That does lead to some problems. It leads to some content issues simply because people write more about what they know and what they're interested in. They'll tend to be dismissive of things as being unimportant if it's not something that they personally have an interest in. I like the example as a parent. I would say our entries on early childhood development probably aren't as good as they should be, because a lot of the Wikipedia volunteers, and actually we're getting older. the Wikipedians, so the demographic has changed a bit. But
That's funny.
it's like if you've got a bunch of 25-year-old tech geek dudes who don't have kids, they're just not going to be interested in early childhood development. And if they tried to write about it, they probably wouldn't do a good job because they don't know anything about it. And somebody did a look at our entries on novelists who've won a major literary prize. And they looked at the male novelist versus the female. And the male novelists had longer and higher quality entries. And why is that? Well, it's not because I know hundreds of Wikipedians. It's not because these are a bunch of biased, sexist men who are like, books by women are not important. It's like, no, actually there is a gender kind of breakdown of readership. There are books, like hard science fiction is a classic example. Hard science fiction, mostly read by men. Other types of novels, more read by women. And if we don't have women in the community, then these award-winning, clearly important novelists may have less coverage. And not because anybody consciously thinks, oh, we don't like a book by Maya Angelou, like who cares? She's a poet, like that's not interesting. No, but just because, well, people write what they know. They write what they're interested in. So we do think diversity in the community is really important. And that's one area where I do think it's really clear. But I can also say, you know what, actually, that also applies in the political sphere. Like to say, actually, we do want kind and thoughtful Catholic priests, kind and thoughtful conservatives, kind and thoughtful libertarians, kind and thoughtful Marxists, to come in. But the key is the kind and thoughtful piece. So when people sometimes come to Wikipedia outraged by some, dramatic thing that's happened on Twitter, they come to Wikipedia with a chip on their shoulder, ready to do battle. Yeah. And it just doesn't work out very well,
And there's tribes in general where I think there's a responsibility on the larger group to be even kinder and more welcoming to the smaller group.
Yeah, we think that's really important. And so, oftentimes people come in and, there's a lot, when I talk about community health, one of the aspects of that we do think about a lot, that I think about a lot, is not about politics. It's just like, how are we treating newcomers to the community? Mm-hmm. And so I can tell you what our ideals are, what our philosophy is, but do we live up to that? So, the ideal is you come to Wikipedia, we have rules, like one of our fundamental rules is ignore all rules, mm-hmm. which is partly written that way because it kind of piques people's attention, like, oh, what the hell kind of rule is that, But basically says, look, don't get nervous and depressed about a bunch of, what's the formatting of your footnote, right? So you shouldn't come to Wikipedia, add a link, and then get banned or yelled at because it's not the right format. Instead, somebody should go, oh, hey, yeah, thanks for helping, but, here's the link to how to format, if you want to keep going, you might want to learn how to format a footnote. And to be friendly and to be open and to say, oh, right, oh, you're new and you clearly don't know everything about Wikipedia. And, sometimes in any community that can be quite hard. So people come in and they've got a great big idea and they're going to propose this to the Wikipedia community and they have no idea. That's basically a perennial discussion we've had 7,000 times before. And so then ideally you would say to the person, oh, yeah, great, thanks. Like a lot of people have, and here's where we got to, and here's the nuanced conversation we've had about that in the past that I think you'll find interesting. And sometimes people are just like, oh, God, another one, who's come in with this idea which doesn't work and they don't understand why.
You can lose patience, but you shouldn't.
And that's kind of human, But I think it just does require really thinking, in a self-aware manner of like, oh, I was once a newbie. Actually, we have great, I just did an interview with Emily Temple Woods, she was Wikipedian of the Year. She's just like a great, well-known Wikipedian. And I interviewed her for my book, and she told me something I never knew. Apparently, it's not secret. Like, she didn't reveal it to me, but is that when she started at Wikipedia, she was a vandal. She came in and vandalized Wikipedia. And then basically what happened was she'd done some sort of vandalized a couple of articles. And then somebody popped up on her talk page and said, hey, like, why are you doing this? Like, we're trying to make an encyclopedia here, and this wasn't very kind.
Yeah.
And she felt so bad. She's like, oh, Right. I didn't really think of it that way. She just was coming in as she was like 13 years old, combative and, like having fun and trolling a bit. And then she's like, oh, actually, I see your point, and became a great Wikipedian. So that's the ideal, really, is that you don't just go troll, block, fuck off.
Yeah.
You go, hey, like what gives, which is, I think, the way we tend to treat things in real life. If you've got somebody who's doing something obnoxious in your friend group, you probably go, hey, like, really, I don't know if you've noticed, but I think this person is actually quite hurt that you keep making that joke about them. And then they usually go, oh, you know what? I thought that was okay. I didn't. And then they stop. Or they keep it up and then everybody goes, oh, well, you're the asshole.
Well, I mean, that's just an example that gives me faith in humanity, that we're all capable and wanting to be kind to each other. And in general, the fact that there's a small group of volunteers that are able to contribute so much to the organization, the collection, the discussion of all of human knowledge it makes me so grateful to be part of this whole human project. That's one of the reasons that I love Wikipedia. It gives me faith in humanity.
No, I once was at Wikimania's, our annual conference, and people come from all around the world, like really active volunteers. I was at the dinner. We were in Egypt, at Wikimania in Alexandria, at the sort of closing dinner or whatever. And a friend of mine came and sat at the table, and she's sort of been in the movement more broadly, Creative Commons. She's not really a Wikipedian. She'd come to the conference because she's into Creative Commons and all that. So we have dinner, and it just turned out I sat down at the table with most of the members of the English Language Arbitration Committee. Mm-hmm. And they're a bunch of very sweet, geeky Wikipedians. And as we left the table, I said to her, it's really like, I still find this kind of sense of amazement. Like, we just had dinner with some of the most powerful people in English language media, because they're the people who are like the final court of appeal in English Wikipedia. And thank goodness they're not media moguls, right? They're just a bunch of geeks who are just like well liked in the community because they're kind and they're thoughtful and they really, sort of think about things. I was like, this is great. Love Wikipedia.
It's like, to the degree that geeks run the best aspect of human civilization, brings me joy in all aspects. And this is true in programming, like Linux, like programmers, like people that kind of specialize in a thing, and they don't really get caught up into the mess of the bickering of society. They just kind of do their thing, and they value the craftsmanship of it, the competence of it.
If you've never heard of this or looked into it, you'll enjoy it. I read something recently that I didn't even know about, but like the fundamental like time zones, and they change from time to time. Sometimes a country will pass daylight savings or move it by a week, whatever. There's a file that's on all sort of Unix-based computers, and basically all computers end up using this file. It's the official time zone file, but why is it official? It's just this one guy.
Yeah.
It's like this guy and a community around him. And basically something weird happened, and it broke something because he was on vacation. And I'm just like, isn't that wild, right? That you would think, I mean, first of all, most people never even think about, like, how do computers know about time zones? Well, they know because they just use this file which tells all the time zones and which dates they change and all of that. But there's this one guy, and he doesn't get paid for it. It's just, he's like, with all the billions of people on the planet, he sort of put his hand up and goes, yo, I'll take care of the time zones.
And there's a lot of programmers listening to this right now with PTSD about time zones. And then there's, on top of this one guy, there's other libraries, the different programming languages that help manage the time zones for you. But still, there's just within those, it's amazing, just the packages, the libraries, how few people build them out of their own love for building, for creating, for community, and all of that. It's I almost like don't want to interfere with the natural habitat of the geek, right? Like when you spot them in the wild, you just want to be like, well, careful. That thing needs to be treasured.
I met a guy many years ago, lovely, really sweet guy, and he was running a bot on English Wikipedia that I thought, wow, that's actually super clever. And what he had done is, his bot was like spell checking, but rather than simple spell checking, what he had done is create a database of words that are commonly mistaken for other words. They're spelled wrong. So I can't even give an example. And so the word is, people often spell it wrong, but no spell checker catches it because it is another word. And so what he did is he wrote a bot that looks for these words and then checks the sentence around it for certain keywords. So in some context, this isn't correct, but buoy and boy.
Mm-hmm.
People sometimes type B-O-Y when they mean B-O-U-Y.
Mm-hmm.
So if he sees the word boy, B-O-Y, in an article, he would look in the context and see, is this a nautical reference? And if it was, he didn't autocorrect, he just would flag it up to himself to go, oh, check this one out. And that's not a great example, but he had thousands of examples. I was like, oh, that's amazing. Like, I would have never thought to do that. And I'm glad that somebody did. And that's also part of the openness of the system. And also, I think, being a charity, being, this idea of like, actually, this is a gift to the world, that makes someone go, oh, well, I'll put my hand up. Like, I see a little piece of things that I can make better because I'm a good programmer and I can write this script to do this thing, and I'll find it fun. Amazing.